for this lesson, we're going to work with our integers, or real numbers. We're going to learn to multiply real numbers. And again, we're going to solve applied problems involving multiplication of real numbers. Guys, you will not get away from math word problems. These are real-world applications that you're going to need. So, multiplication of real numbers is like multiplication of regular arithmetic numbers. The difference is that we must determine whether the answer is positive or negative. So the product of a positive and a negative number, to figure this out, to multiply a positive number and a negative number, multiply the absolute value and the signs are negative. Okay, the way I think about this is, if you have children, and let's say you have 2 children, and you go to McDonald's and you order French fries, one for each child, and they only give you 1 French fry. 1 is an odd number, so if you're driving down the road and you didn't check the bag beforehand, you wind up with a negative outcome because you're going to be miserable because the kids are fighting over who gets the most French fries or who didn't get any and that kind of thing. So I think an odd number of negative signs gives me a negative answer. An even number of negative signs gives me a positive answer. So we're going to practice some of these. Again, remember these little squares are negative. So we are multiplying 7 times negative 9. 7 times negative 9. What do you get? 63. And because you have an odd number of negative signs, then the answer is negative. So let's look at 40 times negative 1. 40 times 1 is 40. Because we only have one negative sign, our answer is negative 40. Alright, let's look at the number 3, or problem 3. We have negative 3, and it looks like this was not a negative sign here. Somehow that's still showing up. But it's not a negative sign. It's actually showing that that's a multiplication sign. So we have negative 3 times 7. Again, if you've printed off your notes, you're following along, you should be good. So negative 3 times 7 is going to be negative 21. We have one negative sign. The next slide just talks about the product of 2 negative numbers. Again, if you have 2 negative numbers, that's an even amount, and even is going to be positive. You get a positive outcome. So let's look at number 1. We have negative 3 times negative 4. Well, 3 times 4 is 12, and because we have 2 negative signs, our answer is positive 12. Number 2 is negative 11 times negative 5. So 11 times 5 is 55, and then the 2 negatives makes it positive, so therefore our answer is just 55. And then problem number 3, we have negative 2 times negative 1. So 2 times 1 is simply just 2. And because it is a even amount, then we have 2 negative signs, which are even. If I can speak today, we'll be doing real good. Our answer is positive, so our answer still is just 2. Alright, to multiply 2 non-zero real numbers, this is just a summary of what we did. Multiply the absolute values. If the signs are the same, the answer is positive. If the signs are different, then the answer is negative. The multiplication of the property of 0, you have a times 0 or 0 times a. And the product of 0 and any real number is always going to be 0. I think y'all remember that back from maybe 4th grade. Okay, it looks like I need to rewrite these for you. You have negative 9 times 0. It's simply going to just be 0. Problem number 2 is really negative 2/3 in parentheses times 4/8 times 0. The answer is still 0. Anything times 0 is going to be 0. Okay, let's look at the next one. These you can do a couple of different ways. It just depends on what you see first, and you can remember order of operations. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But these again are negative. This one's a multiplication sign, and the first one is negative. So we really have negative 9 times 3 times negative 4. Now if it's me, I multiply to get rid of parentheses. That's just the way I am. So I'm going to say negative 9 times negative 12. And then negative 9, that's right. This becomes 3 times negative 4 becomes negative 12. Then negative 9 times negative 12 winds up being 108. So let's look at this one. We have negative 6 times negative 3 times negative 4 times negative 7. Let's rewrite that. So I have negative 6 times negative 3 times negative 4 in parentheses times negative 7. Just depends on what you see first. I kind of will group these two first, so that gives me a positive 18. And then I'll group these two first, and that gives me a positive 28. And then my final answer is going to be 504. And I could have looked at the problem to begin with and realized that my answer was going to be positive, because how many negative signs did I have in problem number 2? I had 4, and 4 is an even number, so therefore it's going to be positive. So quick summary, the product of an even number of negative numbers is positive, and the product of an odd number of negative numbers is negative. Same thing I've been saying the whole time. Okay, let's look at this one. We're going to have to do some substitution. It says to plug in, and we're going to do substitutions. Now, boys and girls, when you plug in, or ladies and gentlemen, when you plug in, substitute in with a set of parentheses. It will keep you straight. And this is really 3x squared. So we're going to sub in a positive 4 first. So we get 3 times 16, which equals 48. And if we go in and do 3x squared, and we're going to sub in the negative 4, 3 times negative 4 squared. Now think about it. How many negative signs? This is the same as saying negative 4 times negative 4. This is why this problem comes out to be the same thing, because you have an even number of negative signs. Be careful. Now we have negative x squared, and then this. Alright, these parentheses mean two different things. If you have negative x squared, that means you are squaring the parentheses. It becomes negative x times negative x. On this one up here, it's just really negative x squared. You're only squaring the x, so it's going to be negative times x times x. So let's work the first one. Negative x squared. We're going to plug in a 6. So you get negative. See how I put it in parentheses? This becomes negative 6 squared, and it becomes positive 36. And then on the second one, if I say negative x squared, I'm simply plugging in negative times 6 squared, so negative times 36 now becomes negative 36. So those are two entirely different answers and different ways to work them. So let's look at a word problem. Again, applied problems. I told you they would be here, and you're going to have some homework problems too. The temperature is a chemical compound. The temperature in a chemical compound was 4 degrees at 1 o'clock. During a reaction, it increased in temperature 2 degrees, that's a little degree sign, per minute until 112. What is the temperature at 112? So let's think about it. The temperature started out at 4 degrees. And then it increases 2 degrees per minute. 2 degrees per minute. If I can spell today, we'll be doing real good. Per minute. For a period of how many minutes? 12 minutes. Very good. You have 112 minus 1 o'clock equals 12 minutes. Very good. So if we say 4 degrees plus 2 times 12, we wind up with 4 plus 24, which is 28. So our final answer is, and you can write it different ways, but it's 28 degrees at 112 was our answer. Alright, now it's your turn to get your book out. Stop the video if you need to, but you're going to do the margin exercises. So the first one we're going to work on is number 3. And number 2. It's negative 3 times negative 6. And when you multiply those, you have one negative sign, so your answer is going to be negative, so you get negative 18. Alright, we're going to multiply fractions, and if you haven't done this in a while, it can be very confusing. To start off, it's just simply easier to multiply straight across and then simplify if you're out of practice. If you have a calculator, you can use your ABC key. You can see me after class, and I'll show you how to do that. Negative 2 times 5 is negative 10, and you have 3 times 6, which is 18. Both of those are divisible by 2. So you can do that if you wanted to. Depends on how you want to do it. Because they're even, I always start with 2, so we looked out that was the greatest one. So negative 10 divided by 2 is going to give me negative 5. Positive 18 divided by 2 is going to give me 9. So our answer is negative 5/9. Problem number 7 is negative 9 times negative 3. We have 2 negative signs, so our answer is going to be positive. So when we go to solve this one, our final answer is 27. Exercise number 10 is negative 4/7 times negative 5/9. Again, you just multiply straight across. We have 2 negative signs, so our answer is going to be positive. So when you go to multiply, you have 4 times 5, that gives me 20. And then 7 times 9 gives me 63. And this is, as far as it goes, it does not simplify any further. Exercise 18 is negative 5/7 times 0 times negative 4 2/3. Well, you have a mixed number here, so your first thought is to fix that. But when you have a 0, anything times 0, remember, is going to be 0. So you didn't even have to worry about that mixed number. Alright, exercise 26. Let me turn my page. Exercise 26. We're going to evaluate. And remember, it means difference it means something different when you have the parentheses around the negative sign than when you don't. So we're going to substitute in a 2. So for the first one, I'm going to say negative 2 squared becomes negative 2 squared, and it becomes 4. This one is written this way because that set of parentheses on the second one, there's not any. So that negative stays outside when we plug in. So that gives us a 4, so our answer is negative 4. So we had 2 answers for this one. We had positive 4 and negative 4. Problem 27, it says to evaluate again. So we're going to plug in negative x squared, and then we have negative x squared. Again, the difference is where the parentheses are, and this time our x is a -3. So we're going to say -3 squared. Remember what happens here? That becomes positive because that's the same as saying -1. So now we're going to say 3 squared, and that gives us 9. And then we're going to plug in over here. So -3 squared is going to give us positive 9, but you have that negative hanging out on the outside. So that's going to give us a -9. Okay, the last problem, it's the word problem. During a chemical reaction, the temperature in a beaker increased by 3 degrees Celsius every minute until 134. If the temperature was -17 degrees at 110 when the reaction began, what was the temperature at 134? So let's think about it. I have 134 when it ended, and it began at 110. So that gives us 24 minutes, right? Now we have 24 minutes. So it increased 3 minutes, 3 degrees per minute for 24 minutes. And it started out at -17. So our problem is going to be -17 plus 3 times 24. And that's going to tell us how it did. So -17 plus 3 times 24. So let's clear this parentheses first. So I have -17 plus 72 equals. So my final answer is 55 degrees Celsius. At 134, it was 55 degrees Celsius. Whoops, 134. Let's change that. Again, this is your assigned homework or suggested homework. If you are in flipped learning, we will do this in class. If you are in a traditional 098 class, these are your homework problems. If you are doing the online, these you can do with your My Math Lab if you would like some extra practices. See you next time.